A lot of questions right now are being raised from this chapter. A lot of just very odd little like nudges and pushes into aspects of the plot that are just being laid out in crumbs were present in this chapter. So right now we have like Xiao Mei. Xiao Mei decides to start out like the entire chapter, and she's like talking about how sometimes in life, you can come to a fork in decisions, and you have to make a choice on one side or the other, and you may never find out what exactly the outcome would have been if you picked the other thing, but you're still who you are at that time and are still moving along in your timeline. Also, I really like the color page. I thought that big color spread was really nice. I thought that was just a really delightful surprise. I didn't know there was a color page this week, so I was pretty hyped. But yeah, Xiao Mei is just talking about essentially going along the pathway that you chose. I think what Mishima is doing in this chapter, and I'll wait until we get to the part with Ziggy in a second, near the end. But I think I can kind of understand what Mishima is basing, at least in concept, all this around. So Ziggy turns off the communication while they're still on Nero 66. Shikis are trying to ask about like the bombs. Obviously, they're finding out about them and know that like these 20,000 antimatter bombs are gonna go off and just completely annihilate the entire area. So Shiki is like put in front of a spot because they're like saying how there's all these people still on the planet. They got to figure out some way to save them, but Rebecca's like, no, like we have to leave. Like there's nothing we can do about this. This wasn't us. There's nothing that can be done. It's either we stay here and die or we get out. And there's like a thing that's like presented with Shiki as a crossroad, and Xiao Mei is there. And I'm wondering if Shiki could actually see that. I think it's implied that he does, because right after the Xiao Mei scene, like you have Rebecca yell at him, call out his name, and you have like the exclamation points. I think he does see this, but you have Xiao Mei saying like he's presented with a fork in the road, one that's a path of survival, or the other one that's using like rash actions that'll lead to death. And she's saying, you have to pick here, you have to make a decision. And here we have Rebecca just kind of like talking to him there now, and kind of like Shiki understanding like we have to get out of here. And that's on the Eden Zero. Was it the Blue Wing? Rebecca's, or Aqua Wing, Rebecca's old ship, just kind of busts in from the Eden Zero, and they were able to kind of like break in there and rescue them and get them out. We also see the Oceans escaping. I'm surprised that Mishima decided to give them some attention. I mean, I guess if he intends to use them again, maybe they'll show up later in the story. I'd like to see them again. Hopefully we can actually get them relevant again sometime, or at least Lyra or Milani. Actually, Callum, I say he's all right. I just don't really know what like a weird like hypno dude is gonna really do in the future. Maybe he could become more of a sport guy instead of being less like a psycho. But I mean, he'd be good for infiltration. But outside of that, you have like Victory, and they're still fighting that big Leviathan ship, and one dude just go like suicide bombs, crashes right into the ship, and gives them time so Eraser could go in and just completely delete it. At that point, the Eden Zero is broadcasting saying that the Alloy Cosmos is done. Shura has been defeated. There's even some guys that I didn't notice this if it was mentioned before, but they bring up the bombs, and there's like a random dude who says like, oh, those are supposed to be at Temple. So some of the guys knew of Shura's plans, which I think is really interesting, and I'm wondering if that's going to be relevant or if that's just something that is noted, because it would make sense if Shura's dudes like could know on some degree, but the fact that they were just like outright like saying like they were aware of what was happening is really surprising. But they have to leave because one of those bombs can wipe out a small planet like Nero 66, so 20,000 is just going to blow away the whole area that they're in. So everybody's trying to escape. There's like one guy who's trying to keep his subordinates there, but they have to knock them out so they can all escape alive. There's some conversation between the Interstellar Union people. They're asking about Creed, but Jesse's not responding, and they just kind of go. The Creed plotline is really weird. Again, I think a lot of the deaths that were presented were more towards Shiki's response to it rather than a reader's response, because from Shiki's perspective, they were people, because from his POV, like we're going to be seeing it as that character. So these to him are like still witnessing people like die that he at some points even met. But how it's gonna affect the Interstellar Union later, I think is gonna be interesting. I wonder if that's gonna have a plot, maybe with Justice and like his team. But everyone's getting back to the Eden Zero. They're kind of just all forming. The Laguna doesn't know where Izuna is. She's probably wherever Shura is, because Shiki's like saying that they like Shura needs a way to get out, but Shura's not there. So that's just how that storyline seems to be going. I already guessed, and it's not confirmed yet, but I already guessed that like Izuna was gonna kill Shura, because like the whole thing about the red thread of fate is it like once it breaks, it turns love into hate, and she was like completely obsessive over Shura, and now she should want to go and kill him. So we'll see how that goes whenever they meet back up. But like Witch is fixed, like Witch is doing pretty good. The Shiki still has the eye patch, or at least the eye bandage. I really want either some form of eye cover or a robotic eye. The robotic eye doesn't even have to have a different people. It could literally be Shiki's eye, but just knowing that it's robotic. I just don't want his eye to be fixed. I don't want just to be like, yeah, well, sister healed it. I don't really want that. I'd like the more either in the idea of like an exploration, kind of like a badass can look like an eye patch or some form of cover, or giving him a cybernetic eye, because I think it'd be cooler for a series, obviously, in the terms of being a sci-fi series. But at the end of the chapter, they're kind of just doing their thing. Like their ship is getting messed with, and that's when Ziggy comes in. And this is really important. So people noted that Shiki got his eye injury on the same side that Ziggy's helmet was damaged. And I was on board with more of the idea like, oh, that's just a coincidence, nothing really crazy about that. But then we get to look inside his helmet, and it looks like there's teeth and an eye in there. And so I talked about at the beginning of the chapter my at least theorized belief of Mishima and like what he's kind of doing with the Eden Zero, because the other stuff, it's like, okay, well, the Eden Zero is losing functions. They're like, the detonation is going to go off in 1 minute. They have to get him out of there, or something bad's going to happen. As well as you have Witch, I guess, stepping up to kind of do everything. And there's like a whole part where Ziggy's talking. He says, there wouldn't have happened if you had tried to stop the explosion. You wouldn't have ended up destroying everything. So this is going to be obviously like a big explosion that's just going to go off. And now Witch is stepping up to the plate and going to hopefully get the Eden Zero away. I assume so. But, so my belief, so Mishima, here's the thing. And, obviously this isn't that long. It's only about 8 minutes. So anybody who stayed in this long is going to hear this. Strong. This is my strong theory on what's going on right now with the story structure and what Mishima's kind of going with. So the whole idea that Shiki is like drawing people in, obviously gravity, and then you have Rebecca with time manipulation and the ability to kind of like reverse time, and the two of them kind of together in like how their powers work. We know that the Satan gravity has like an added effect onto Cat Leaper. We already know that from when she went way back in time after being captured by Drac and Joe and going from World 29 to World 30. So with this, there's the idea of how Mishima is laying this out. So with time being not as important to the story as it does most stories, as we were shown like way early on, I personally think that Ziggy is like a version of Shiki at some point in the future. Because think about it like this. The way that he's saying like you made the wrong choice, and he's presented with the idea of, okay, do something rash, try and fix it and save the people, or leave and save yourselves. I think what he did with that, when he specifically was saying like doing rash things, is Mishima was saying like kind of do like a way more regular, kind of like heroic thing. Kind of you want to save people, you want to kind of do something about it. But Shiki is not that. And I mentioned that I think that what Mishima is going with his main characters as well is, I've mentioned a couple times in other videos, Haru was more of a straightforward hero. Natsu is like a good guy, but he sometimes can be in the gray. Whereas like Shiki, I think Shiki is going to be overall a good guy, but like I say it as like an anti-villain, kind of like how I have an anti-hero who's like a good guy that does bad guy things. I think Shiki is going to essentially be a bad guy who does good guy things. Like he's bad when he has to be, but for the most part he acts like nice to the people that are kind to him and that are his friends. So if Ziggy is at some point in the future and he comes back saying you made the wrong choice, this you just could have just stayed down there and tried to fix it, but instead you're gonna destroy everything. Because potentially once the Eden Zero showed up, and let me just go back to see exactly who was on the Aquawing when they showed up really quick, pulling back. And on top of that, like, you have 20 minutes at that point. You could get somebody like Hermit or somebody like Pino. Yeah, the Aquawing shows in, and Tomura, Jin, Sylph, and Wise. Wise potentially could have done something too. So I think that if Shiki was more rash and decided to make more of a heroic type move there, things would have actually, worked out in their favor. But Shiki decided to do the safer thing, get out of there, and that's going to lead to the death of a lot of characters. And again, even though they're no names to the readers, it's not supposed to be one of those. This is a different situation. This is going to be one for the character. Though it isn't Shiki's fault, Shiki didn't make the decision to try and do something. Though, it's a rough area in that whole area, in that kind of situation. But Ziggy saying you made the wrong choice, and then showing that there's like a head inside of him. And I don't know if that's just supposed to be a visual, or if it's something to do that like Mishima is like doing to have a mess with him. But I feel like there's a person inside there. Like, either a damaged person, like maybe Ziggy is just a head, or he is building a body inside of his suit. Who knows? Like, there's obviously a lot of questions that come around Ziggy as a character. But when he's saying, and then obviously when he's saying that, when if you wouldn't have happened, or this wouldn't have happened if you tried to stop the explosion, you would have ended up destroying everything. It just makes me think that at some point he is one in the future. But when he says this is the wrong choice, this could lead to two questions. Is Ziggy Shiki, who's trying to, like, he's trying to go back in time and build him a better pathway? Because maybe Ziggy is like the worst ending, like Shiki making every wrong decision, or every major bad decision in scenarios like this, or at least a lot of bad decisions, and he's trying to go back and stop Shiki from doing it. Because maybe Shiki's actions end up, when he said that Shiki's going to destroy the universe, maybe he meant it like, oh, those decisions are what's going to, be bad options that eventually go down it. And when you look at the series, and again, Mishima is like a big guy in video games, and one of the things, obviously, about like JRPGs is a lot of them have alternate endings. A lot of times it's referred to, you can either just have the good ending or the bad ending. You can have multiple endings. But maybe that's where Rebecca's whole point in the story is. She's almost like a save point, or like a do-over in some of the decisions and some of the events. So if the idea of it, again, in being like a JRPG where it's like you have alternate endings, and Mishima being a dude who always does stuff on like time and how time affects the story and stuff, and we already know how that, quote unquote, time doesn't matter in this story, that maybe it's going to be like Shiki's worst decisions lead to this thing. Shiki's worst decisions are going to be what leads to the end of the universe, and Rebecca is going to be the tool that helps him lead to the good ending instead. And the whole stuff about like dark gravity and true gravity, there's a lot of questions in there. Because it would also make sense if like this instead isn't worse past Shiki. Like, what if this is still a good pathway to Shiki, but it's like Shiki is going to destroy the universe, so he has to destroy him. But he made the right choice, and that's how he would know, like, each one. Because it would make sense that also if he had the true gravity, if this was, like, the good ending Shiki, but for whatever reason he had to come back like this. There's a lot of questions, obviously, in the story, and a lot of things that are, are just teased and not, revealed yet. But this was definitely a really big hype moment, and definitely a big point in the story that's going to hold a lot of weight. So, other than that, though, comment below, thumbs up the video, but friend the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. Other than that, appreciate everybody's already subscribed. Thank you all for listening. Bye.